Child Protective Services, nonprofit agencies for the better part of 20 years. But my domestic violence case kind of took over and had me reorient my life a little bit. So I was able, by the grace of God, to keep my 2 kids, but I thought, even though I followed everything that family court told me to do, and I got A+ and stars and bells and whistles for that, it didn't matter. I still lost my daughter when she turned 18, because waiting to cross that finish line, which is the only thing that could keep me going throughout the court case. I thought, well, once she turns 18, I can tell her the truth. She can open up the books of the family court case and she can read everything that happened, and all the answers will come and explain. And then we'll have the rest of our lives to build that good mother-daughter relationship. I always thought that at least I kept it safe. She turned 18 and just said, essentially, like, you're a freak show of a mom. You use family court as an excuse. I don't want to hear your truth. I don't want to hear any more of your lies. I'm done with you and I'm gone. So she's been gone for 2.5 years now. I haven't seen her. And it's been devastating. So I've been kind of out of doing this work for the last 2 years, because to say that I was angry at the whole world and everybody in it is probably an understatement. Being a therapist myself, or formerly working in the system, and I believed in that system, and seeing the system fail me and my children so badly, I really didn't want to hear from anybody or anything. So even trying to talk to moms and stuff, I didn't want to fill them with hatred. Yes?
Was she feeling that way because of things she'd heard from your ex-husband?
She just came to her own conclusions, and I guess what happened to me is I figured out the way to get a good outcome in my family court case, not only to do everything they were telling me, but was to do the advocacy, because if I could improve everybody else to turn to, the Blessed Virgin Mary, for one, the Mother of Christ. There's actually something called the Tears and Sorrows meditation, and I was thinking, like, if I just meditated on her tears and sorrows instead of what I was going through, maybe it would have been easier to get blessings, or at least have the grace or a little bit more comfort in going through the family court case. Because tell me if any of you guys can relate to this. The prophecy of Simon, where he goes up to her and says, and the sword shall pierce your heart. And she's saying, like, what are you talking about? She just had this beautiful baby delivering to the temple. The flight of the Holy Family into Egypt, how many of us had to flee? Jesus Christ is lost in the temple when your child is, you don't know where they are. The meeting of Mary and Jesus on the way to the cross. I mean, can you imagine having to see your child suffer and to have to watch that? The crucifixion. How many people feel like they're being crucified in front of everybody stripped naked? Jesus is taken down from the cross, looking what's left of the shambles of your life that you used to have, and the burial of Jesus. I mean, for those mothers who have actually literally had to bury your child, if I concentrated on these sorrows or something, Mary completely understands our struggles and our sorrows and has cried the same tears, and she's really a good person to turn to and say, Mother of God, please give me the strength to help bear the sufferings that you went through so that God's work can happen in our lives. And in doing that, she's promised 7 graces. That's going to be in your handouts there, that if we meditate on these mysteries, that she's given us 7 promises. One is that I will grant peace to their families. They will be enlightened about the divine mysteries. I will console them in their pains and accompany them in their work. I'll tell you, I would love the Spirit of the Virgin Mary to be with me as I walk into family court. That is a great comfort to me. So better than thinking that I'm going in there with my attorney who's being paid or thinks she knows what she's doing or whatever that was. So anyways, in the Bible, lots of weapons and tools. We have the miraculous medal, which for those of you who are interested, I've got a pile of miraculous medals here that you are free to take. They have been blessed by a priest. Please wear them. I wear mine around my neck, put it in your purse, keep it in your bedroom. Definitely take it with you to court. Have something holy on you. The rosary is something else. It's a series of prayers that we go through. That's explained. There's also websites that can make it really easy. There's actually a priest and a congregation reciting it, so I'll turn it on while I'm doing my work and thinking about it at the same time. So those are devotions, but these are the promises of the miraculous medal, and again, that's in your handout over there. Now, St. Rita, she's somebody who's really awesome that we should know about, and I thought it was really interesting how Rita Smith was the executive director for the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, because St. Rita is the patron saint of domestic violence, okay? She has a novena, which is a series of prayers that you would say, a prayer and a meditation for 9 days, and St. Rita is supposed to watch over those who pray her novena. see if any of this sounds familiar. So she's the patron saint of hopeless causes, family problems, and things despaired of. So the first day of prayer is for those whose hopes have been frustrated, prayer for those trapped in a difficult marriage and those experiencing domestic violence, prayer for the mothers of difficult children and teenagers, prayer for those who have experienced discord and hatred in the family, prayer for those who are at risk of feeling bitter, prayer for all of us to persevere in prayer, prayer for those who experience painful illness and rejection, prayer for us to be open to others, and then the last one is a prayer for my intention, which seems impossible. So like asking for your daughter to come home, asking for justice in your case, asking for the judge to repent of his sins, that kind of stuff. So stuff that I put in the handout, lots of references in the Bible to provide comfort and console to us. So because it's really hard reading the family court orders, reading the decisions, what people have thought about you, and there is tons and tons of material in there that makes you feel loved by God. And that's the thing, all of us have been put here for a reason on this earth, and He truly loves us. So that's like really good, exciting news. What to do with your enemies. This is kind of interesting. I think it was last Christmas I was in Walmart and I saw this book caught my eye and I said, oh goody, now I'm going to read what's going to happen to the perps and the corrupt judges at the end. Well, the thing is that actually when I read this, it's 23 Minutes in Hell. It's about a man who had a vision of going to hell. And after reading that, I have found the ability to pray for those corrupt judges, because if they do not repent, we're talking an eternity of misery, and the stuff that's described in there is so horrific, you really wouldn't wish on anyebody. I can now freely pray for my ex-husband that he finds repentance and peace of God, because you really, really, really don't want to go there. Nobody. So, and seriously, I am praying for the family court judge now, for the corrupt custody evaluator, for everybody, because it's really horrific stuff. But again, when you look in the Bible, it is already promised in there. The other thing that I found in the book of Proverbs that's in the handout, it said that God actually hates 6 or 7 kinds of people. And I was like, wow, I didn't know God would hate. I thought God was all about love. But 2 of those 7 things are those who tell lies in court, and it was very specific, and it says that those who cause trouble in families. Okay, so I'm thinking, okay, that qualifies for the perps and the judges and everybody affiliated with them. So after reading this book, I'm able to pray a lot more freely. So when you're going to court, please try to remember to pray before you go. The prayer of a righteous person is powerful and effective. And that's the thing. Out of all the lies that we hear from the judges, from the therapists, well-intending, however they may be, whatever mistruths, half-truths, half-baked truths that we get, the Bible is God's word and His truth, and that is irrevocable, irreplaceable, and that you can put your faith in, and it will not betray you. It absolutely won't. Everything else that comes in through the mail and the court system, probably not good. But keep a symbol of your faith on you so that at least you feel that connection when you're going into court. And pray when you're there. If you grab the hand of somebody else, for where 2 or 3 have gathered together in my name, I am there in their midst. Okay, family court at this point, I am convinced, is the den of the devil. There is nothing holy in there. There is no crosses. There are no Bibles. They've taken the swearing off of the so help me God off of the swearing in process. If God is not mentioned there, then it's somebody else's domain, and that's an unholy place so far as I'm concerned. So evoke the name of Lord Jesus Christ and God. If you want Him in your family court hearing, have Him be there. When things don't turn out right, it might be for a bigger, grander purpose. That's what I'm holding on to and trying to believe, or wanting to believe, going there. When you're brought into trial, and this is from the Bible too, when you're brought into trial in the Jewish meeting places before the rulers or officials, don't worry about how you will defend yourselves or what you will say. At that time, the Holy Spirit will tell you what to say. So that's the thing, it's like when this is coming directly from God, then you can actually put your faith in it and believe it. The other thing that I thought was really funny is up here, God's realm, this world versus God's realm. This floored me, because remember, the Bible is 2,000 years old, okay? And this is what it says in Corinthians 6:4. Why do you take everyday complaints to judges who are not respected by the church? And I'm like, wow, so even in the Bible, they're condemning the court system before. I was like, wow, that's pretty severe when you're thinking of where this family court crisis thing has been in the last 40, 50 years or something. Even Book of Corinthians is saying the court is not a good place to go. So then I started last Thursday night, as I was putting this together, I was going to say, when you've fallen under the weight of your cross, you can trust in the Lord with all your heart. Do not depend on your own understanding. So I took a break from putting the slides together for this. And like I told you, my daughter has been gone for 2.5 years, and every once in a while I will like send a little scripture there because, I don't know, it's, you know, you just send it out there and chances are I would imagine she's opening it, deleting it, or Xing it, or I've been blocked or whatever it is. But I forget what scripture word I sent out there, but it was something hopeful. And this time I actually got a response. So, Connie, you want to do the honors? No, you can just read the underlined purple because she wrote something long, actually. So I sent her some scripture, and this was her response.
Okay, the email from last Thursday. But now that you mention it, I actually was going to ask if I could come back for a while. I finally kind of took a look back and realized that no matter how I've tried to move forward, it hasn't been working. Like, no matter what sort of plan I come up with, something always goes wrong. So I was thinking, if I can't go forward, why not see if I could go back?
So my daughter has actually asked to come home, and I'm just absolutely. But praise be to God, and this is to His glory, because I got to tell you, after being in the court system for as long as I will, and doing everybody's, I feel like a poodle. You know, you do the tricks and the tapping therapy and the visualization and the blue light and like everything they could probably do to, you know, try to keep your psyche together or something, only to lose her at the end. And then the answers were here all the time. The faith is, after everything I've seen and everything I've done, this has been the rock, this has been the foundation, and this has been the only thing to bring my daughter home. And if anybody's going to be able to do it, it's going to be God. So
is she coming
my
back?
faith. And I don't know. I haven't really responded to the email because I'm terrified. I mean, I went to see a spiritual advisor finally in February because I'm like, I can't go around hating everybody and praying for bad things. So the spiritual advisor told me, he said, you love your daughter, right? And I said, yes. And he said, okay. He goes, do you think God loves her more or less? And I said, well, more. And then he goes, okay, then why don't you stop competing with God? And I go, huh? And he goes, you said she's in His hands, so take your hands off. And I'm like, you know, he said, just leave Him in the hands, let Him do His work, give Him the time to do what He needs to do. And he said, I can't tell you when, but if God gave her to you, she will come back. He goes, granted, it may not be in your time or when you would like. He said, maybe 2 years, maybe 10 years, maybe 20. He said, might not be her. It might be a boyfriend, it might be a husband, it might be a grandchild who's going to reach out to you. He said, but there will be some kind of connection. He said, it's not a vacuum. He said, but give her to God. So my old fear of putting Isaac, I said, okay, you know what? You can have her. You can absolutely have her. And that was February 16th, and I'm not kidding you. It seems like every day since then, no more despair, no more depression, and I'm happy to say this. I've been on antidepressant medication for the last 20 years. I am not taking medication. I'm waking up every morning. I want to wake up. I can't even get to tell you. I'm waking up, and I'm like, thanks be to God. I'm not waking up saying, why have you cursed me with another day here? I'm tired. There's no more depression. And I can't even explain that. But I just let go. I really let go. I really let God. I'm putting my whole heart, my whole faith into His hands. And I did not expect this after 3 months. I've got it in my head 20 years from now. So I'm absolutely scared out of my wit. I'm happy beyond belief, but terrified. I don't even want to dare to hope. But
All you have to tell her is that you love her. That you love her and that, yes, come home. I love you.
yeah, I've told her I've loved her before, but she said very unkind, very nasty.
Well, she
things
wants to come home now, so she's not going to say something unkind.
I know. So it's.
You don't have to write like this is my opinion.
Yeah.
You don't have to write like a long email. My experience has been that with children going through this, the most important thing, all children, is to know their mothers love them and they're there for them no matter what.
Yes.
That's just my opinion.
Yep. Well, that's what I'm gonna do. I mean, well.
I'm wondering.
Yes.
I'm wondering if it's like you're thinking about too far in advance in the future.
I
Because
know.
the true answer, in my opinion, I would think from what you're saying is, well, of course you will come home. So,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
like, it's so easy to say that instead of thinking about, well, if you do this and if that happens and if this happens and what are you going to do about this and how are we going to make that happen? I mean, easier for it's not when it's someone else for me to say to you.
Yeah.
But the first answer is you're not going to say no.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of scary though, because the note that she left on was really horrific stuff that would have been, arrows shooting through your heart. But that's the thing that I found out about love too. I love her so much that all those "I hate you, I hope you burn in hell, I hope you die, it just went right by me. It's just like it was the absence, the loss, and like, what do you do? Like, acting as a mom, like, did she really exist? I mean, I haven't seen hide or hair. She doesn't do social media, so I don't know what she looks like anymore. I don't know if she's okay. I have no idea. But so having that complete absence in your life, that vacuum, that was soul sucking out. And then trying to recover from something like that, you just don't. So like, even last year when I went to Washington D.C., I saw Mo, whose daughter ended up killing herself. And I was just thinking, that would be the easier part, because I could put a place to mourn, but I'd be standing in the post office and all of a sudden, I don't know what would happen. I mean, I just burst out crying. I'm driving my son, my poor son. I have a 17-year-old son, and he's watching this, and I'm going, I can't have a nervous breakdown. I've got to function as a parent, and besides, if this gets back out to anybody, they'll be back in my house. But then again, just so that you do know, after I lost my daughter, I figured, F everybody's rules. I sat down at the table and I told my son absolutely everything, and what he did is he just winced and he just said, "Oh, Mom, you shouldn't have lied to us." But then again, when I went charging to the attorney and therapist, and like, "You son of a bitch, I did everything you freaking said," and blah, blah, they said, "Well, at least you still have your son," and I said, "Well, this wasn't an either or deal when I left him, when we lost everything, and then I'm going to lose her, and you're saying it's okay." And they said, "Well, you did everything right." But as the therapist pointed out, she said, if you took any other course of action than you did, she said, don't hesitate for a second to think that they wouldn't have taken both of your kids on your moral ground. So that's the thing, it's hard to live with. I mean, I was complicit, like when they said, surrender your daughter or we'll take both your kids. Okay, I surrendered her. I did it with the happy face he told me to. She thinks I betrayed her, and she doesn't know that I betrayed her yet. Hopefully we'll have that time in the future so I can show her, like, look, I really did fight for you. But in the meantime, like, I just told my son, because I said, I don't care who comes in here now. I don't care what I violated. I don't care. But then again, for mothers going through this, there's got to be some kind of a balance, because you don't want to trigger their wrath. In the long term, though, your children are your own and they're gifts from God. And one way or another, you have the faith of a mustard seed, they'll be coming home, right? So thank you, and God bless. Okay.
I'd just like to remark on one thing, that I'm seeing a pattern emerge here. Well, you and I know this woman who just came out of prison.
Yes.
5 years in prison.
Yes.
Who's living under a safety plan, so I won't even mention where she is, but they don't rent apartments to ex-cons. You can't go and rent an apartment. Mm-hmm. So what was she going to do?
Yeah.
And so she worked very hard, beating on doors, trying this, that. Her parents worked on it. They were both retired school teachers. They lived in this town for years. And so finally, at one point, she said, I'll just give it over to God. And the next day, she got a place.
Yep.
No,
Praise
didn't have
be to
to sign
God.
the lease.
Uh-huh.
So sometimes maybe, if you're praying for a miracle, you need to just give it over to God.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep. Thank you. Thank you.
So, thanks, Dara, for asking me to talk about prayer. We're on the prayer line every night. I'm sure Connie will tell you about that a little later. I've been in school recently, which is really weird for a 58-year-old, but we have a college professor, my mother and I. She accompanies me to all my classes. And he is an atheist, a rabid atheist. And he makes everybody in the class who believes in God feel like an idiot, and he tells them so. I mean, blasphemes left and right. So my mother and I figured we weren't going to let him get away with that. So we stood up for God in the college classroom. But we were studying philosophers, and one of them was Epictetus, an ancient philosopher you may have heard of. And there are Christian Stoics, so I thought, it would be all right to talk about Christian Stoicism. I'm a Christian, and we need to be stoic about this. So I just wanted to read you a paper that I wrote to get around the atheistic professor. Okay. Greetings and welcome to the 11th annual Battered Mothers Custody Conference here in beautiful Secaucus, New Jersey. I've been asked to speak to you about Christian Stoicism and the concept that life is a stage. Epictetus has written a manual on how to find freedom through mastery of the self. This is the formula for freedom and away from frustration. I agree with him, and I'll tell you why. Suddenly, we are called upon to excel at the skills required to recover our children. We must let ourselves be driven by the love for them inside of us. The day-to-day caring and providing for them must be redirected into acquiring navigational and combat skills. Epictetus' manual perfectly applies to mothers at war with a tyrannical and oppressive court system. In particular, the admonishment to remember that you are an actor in a drama of such sort as the author chooses. That gave me my end. This gives strength to a mother whose child has been ordered into sexual slavery. If it be his pleasure that you should be an activist, see that you act it well. For this is your business, to act well the given part, but to choose it belongs to another. We cannot waste time casting about for a reason for the tragedy that has befallen us, or agonizing over what we could have done. Cyclical thinking. You did not have the script of the play handed to you ahead of time. There is no dress rehearsal. You simply must find the intestinal fortitude to act. Elie Wiesel wrote on the death camps and told of prisoners who cared for others, who would not give in to indignity. A world-renowned ballerina was recognized by a guard. Her head shaven, her body naked, and her teeth pulled out. He ordered her to dance in front of them. She danced over to the guard, drew his weapon, and killed him. She was in a short drama, and she played her part well. Mothers of sex-trafficked children are in a long drama. They find themselves with an assigned role that requires great self-mastery to survive. Shoulder this responsibility and join the ranks of your fellow sisters, soldiers, in this crucial work. We can't promise you 3 hots and a cot, but we do guarantee a vigorous campaign, excitement, and an opportunity to express your outrage. Join those of us who cast off caring what masses of people who are ignorant of the courts think. I just heard you say. We don't have to give evidence. We are evidence. We are mama lions with a fire in our belly and willing to face their best dirty lawyers, so bring them on. It is time to exercise the concept reload. In between the spear and the atomic bomb is our surgical strike. Our freedom consists in letting go of part of ourselves we hold most dear, so that the ripping away does not result in death. We are in a role that requires action to reform a system, and requires a compartmentalization of feeling that frees us for action. We must bide our time like the ballerina, at the same time mastering our minds to prevent the memory of our children's pleas from paralyzing us. Like a stoic, we need to control our passions and our love at all times in order always to be ready for the inevitable goodbye. To paraphrase Epictetus, if your loved one has been taken away by a bad man, what is it to you by whose hand he who gave it has demanded it again? While he permits you to possess it, hold it as something not your own, as do travelers at an inn. The author chooses. What would the author have his character experience that would propel her to the halls of power to change the world? If he assigned her to happily raising her baby in peace and safety, would she be propelled to save the nation's children? No. Only if that baby was forcibly separated from her would she really, really feel it. It has happened to you. It has happened to me. It is your new painful reality. Your part is scripted. Now you have to decide whether you're going to play it. You can self-destruct or act well the part the author has given you. You can play it with all your heart to the plot's denouement and a possibly glorious victory as a combat soldier, or you can go home. Remind yourself, says Epictetus, that if you embrace your child, you embrace a mortal, and thus, if it dies, you can bear it. The plot thickens as you are made to watch not merely your child's death, but the court-ordered torture of your child, while the full power of the United States government, under color of law, ties your hands. You are poised for flight. Now fly straight into their faces and fight for the greater good. Epictetus teaches us to distinguish what is in our power from what is not in our power. He states, beyond our power is body, property, reputation, office. Mothers everywhere are daily faced with this dread reality regarding our own bodies and those of our children. With regard to reputation, stigmatization is the first unpleasing semblance to which you must be able to say, it is nothing to me, as it concerns a thing beyond my power. Within our power are opinion, aim, desire, and aversion. We aim to survive in order to eradicate this plague from our nation. In combat survival school, airmen must overcome their food aversions to be able to survive. Likewise, we must overcome the habit of averting our eyes from court abominations. Our aversions must be removed and applied to dismantling lawless climates of the court which are within our power as citizen soldiers to change. As soldiers, we leave our precious children suspended in mind. Our thoughts are bent toward the ship and perpetually attentive lest the captain should call. And as we must leave all these things and never look behind. My captain called, and it's been a great adventure ever since, because my captain talks to that captain. Stolen years of childhood can never be recovered, so it is more effective to demand not that events should happen as you wish, but wish them to happen as they do happen, and you will go on well. These are the words of Epictetus. Never once has a mother been convinced to wish her child be raped, but it is imperative to convince you to sign on with an army formed against the production of rapists, as your child likely will one day rape another's grandchild. My son is destined, I fear. We fear the trauma experienced each time we enter the hall of justice. You're not born knowing how to deal with fear, but you can learn to handle your fear. You fight against your fear and overcome it through self-control. Development of this skill is a way to make the best out of what life has thrown at you. This is a disposition you can develop in yourself. It's very difficult and really hard work. Few will be able to gain moral courage, especially the onlookers who are as guilty as the perpetrators. If you can understand that you are in a play, it will take you a long way toward training to become an activist. You will not experience ideal happiness with this horror thrust upon you. But a virtuous or skillful life leads to happiness, and a skillful soldier on Capitol Hill is the best hope for an enslaved child, and your own sanity. Sister soldiers, take care not to be overcome by the apparent evil of each other's grieving. They do not disdain to accommodate themselves to each other, and if need be, to groan with each other. Epictetus says, take heed, however, not to groan inwardly too. During one conference, mothers were invited to tell their stories. I'm sure you remember, after 17 awful true stories told with cookie-cutter identical horror, all of our hearts were on the floor. That invitation was not reissued. You can share a burden and lighten it, and together we can face fear and master it. Don't let it master you. It takes battlefield courage to engage our opponents in this fearful situation where our children's lives are at stake. There is great satisfaction that comes from engaging the makers of oppressive policy. Do not turn away without testing your courage. No one will accuse you of having led a pathetic life if you act on your highest priority, a good outcome for all of America's mothers and children. This is meant for your inspiration and encouragement. What makes you free is when your higher priority takes charge over your stronger desire, which is to retreat, to just lie down like they want you to. Knowing what you want and acting on it is what makes you free. Epictetus says that death is nothing terrible. The terror consists in our notion of death, that it is terrible. I say, better to die with your boots on and swinging a sword than to live long into a regretful old age. If you are within the sound of my voice, and you are playing your part, you may be aware of some foreshadowing the author has revealed to you in your past. Perhaps he has prepared you to survive this grueling trial during many small training trials. You probably thought at the time, glad that's over. Hope I'm never put in a place where I'll have to use that knowledge, that skill, that ability. But that day has come. And you are being called upon to fulfill some higher purpose he has in mind. You can say like Jesus, take this cup away from me. I don't want to drink it. But ultimately, if you will rise to the task, you will taste victory and all the gusto this banquet of life has to offer. Thank you, Lord, for the gift of life. The bonds between sisters and our common struggles become stronger than the blood bonds you were born to. Join this band of sisters he has given you as we move through this far country on a journey your relatives disdain to comprehend. You are not alone. The corrupt system creates 58,000 potential soldiers each year that it continues to be permitted to exist, but will they sign on? The time is drawing near. This is surely a banner year to be a public witness. Sign on. The lines are drawn and clear. We're going public with this. And as we are on a stage, let us put up the marquee, now playing Death of a Family Court, the demise of a lawless institution. Thousands of our fallen witness from the wings. So declare to heaven by your action that you are a warrior. Our children clasp tickets in hand and wait expectantly. Play your part, because we cannot allow the curtain to rise on a motherless future for one more child. Now a word from our sponsor. If you want to have the power to survive in this awful situation, you need the indwelling of God's Holy Spirit. It's the dunamis, the dynamic power that God gives you to stand up. I don't know how else to put it. The Holy Spirit tells you in a still small voice in the back of your mind, go left, go right, talk to this person, don't talk to that person. He directs you in your adventure, and you will find miracles happening along your path all the way along. So when God picks you, taps you, and calls you, all you can do really is give him a snappy salute and say, aye, aye, Captain, and be obedient. And then move your feet, because he can work better with feet that are moving than feet that are standing still or lying down. So just get up and come with us. Come with us. Thank you. Kathy Lee, Holden, I love you. I'm coming for you.
On your motorcycle.
Yes.
These are two hard acts to follow.
Yeah, thanks. I'm by nature really shy, so I don't like to stand up and talk. But if you can't hear me, I will. Does anybody can't hear me?
I can hear you, Connie.
Okay, thanks, Lori. All right. I love how God worked in this whole sequence, because it just flowed from one thing to the other. We didn't collaborate prior to this at all. The author did. So I would like to start out with what we in California were trying to do in the early 90s. We were trying to put our arms around something that was happening that was so horrendous that we couldn't even put our arms around it. We could not understand what was happening at all. It turns out at the same time in Washington, D.C., people who were way ahead of us were busy demonstrating. Back in the early 90s, there was a huge demonstration led by Marilee McLean, who you heard. But in California, we were oblivious to that. But 3 of us were Christian, so we decided that it was much too big for us, and we would start asking for divine help, because we realized that we were getting nowhere. We were a train off the track, and the motors were running, but the wheels weren't going anywhere. So we read about the mothers of the Plaza de Mayo in Argentina,
who prayed and demonstrated in front of the headquarters of their federal government that was busy disappearing their adult children in great numbers. And that was maybe 30 years ago, maybe 40 years ago they started. They called themselves the Mothers of the Disappeared. We were pretty far away from the headquarters of our federal government because we were in California. You can't get much farther away than that. So we started walking around the Central Park in Davis, California, where we happen to live, praying. Sometimes in the rain, sometimes in the sun. It was, sometimes we would just sit and pray, but we would pray. We also started an annual conference in Davis that had its 21st Child Sexual Abuse Awareness Conference last month. We frequently focused on family court in that, which was consistently putting children with their identified sexual abusers. So time went on. The Battered Mothers Custody Conference started. We started as a nonprofit, the California Protected Parents Association, in 1999. We were trying basically to stop the slaughter of the innocents in California. We didn't even think about the rest of the country. We didn't even know what was going on in the rest of the country. So we started out, my wonderful partner in anti-crime, Karen Anderson, who's, yay, Karen, we'll applause for Karen. Probably the fiercest warrior I've ever met, and possessed of an incredibly good sense of humor. We decided, first of all, we decided what to do and how we would structure our organization. We said, well, you be president and I'll be executive director. And then we looked them up and said, no, you be executive director and I'll be president, because one is an extrovert and the other is an introvert. So we parsed that out. Didn't know what we were doing. Next problem. What were the 3 branches of government? I don't know. I remembered 2. She remembered 1. We put it together. Okay, what we'll do is we'll just tell them what's happening, and they'll fix it, and we'll go out of business immediately. So we started with the legislature, and we started walking around every week with a new horrible case, a synopsis of a new horrible case. We did it for 52 weeks. We ended up with people putting great laws into place. We had total support, and the judges completely ignored them. So we realized, back to prayer. We have wicked judges, just like Habakkuk, the book of Habakkuk says. And by that time, maybe a decade ago, but over the last 15 years, we've gotten well over 3,000 contacts from mothers. We've gotten 10 contacts from men, from fathers. Of those, I would say 5 of them could qualify as mothers because they were being treated in the same way. Most of them were people of color. So we figured this is pretty much a women's issue. Wasn't any doubt about that. We figured it was. And we also began to profile mothers because they were already profiled. Look around you. Every one of you is attractive, intelligent, and assertive. You may have been beat to death, but that's how you started out, as attractive, intelligent, assertive. And also, many of you who called me said, I pray a lot. And I thought, okay. There were a lot of people who were Christian prayer people. And I thought, sociopaths know what they're doing. They marry Christian women who will not kill them, no matter what, because we won't go to hell for their crimes. So that was pretty clever of them, I think. Every mother and the 5 decent fathers out of the 10 said they were fleeced of all their money, all their possessions, and when they couldn't afford an attorney, they were fleeced of their children. Their beloved children were taken. And they were left without, well, just like Job, homeless, penniless, relativeless, hopeless, covered with sores, sitting in a pile of ashes. That's where all these intelligent, attractive, assertive mothers have ended up, all of us. But there was a little spark left in almost all of us. Just a little spark. It was God's spark. So in 2003, we figured, okay, three women in Davis, that's not big enough. Well, we started a prayer conference call. And that didn't get to be much more than 3 to 5 people either. But I have to tell you, there's Kathy Lee right here. She's up at midnight because she's on the East Coast, and we arranged it at 9 o'clock on the West Coast, which was great. And the reason for 9 o'clock is that in Great Britain during World War II, which I was born in the middle of, all of London was to stop and pray at 9 o'clock at night when Big Ben struck 9, because they were being crushed by the Nazis. I mean, the Nazis they were on their shores. They were ready to just be wiped out. But the Brits are pretty stoic, and the Brits said, all right, we'll just keep praying. So they would pray. And one time, a huge squadron, I read this in the newspaper too, I mean, regular news press, so it might have had some truth to it. I think it does. A huge squadron of German MiGs came over, this gigantic squadron, and the Brits said, all right, and they, put the duct tape on their 3 little planes, and they put the baling wires around the, wings, and they got up and they went at the, they figured we'll just go out and with a bang. And the MiGs all turned around and fled. They shot one of them down because it was really early in the, that period. The planes were probably off the ground this far, and the pilot lived. And they grabbed the pilot and they said, why did you turn around? I guess they got an interpreter. And he said, how could we have even stood up to the armada that you had coming at us? It was 9 o'clock.
Wow.
Over London. So we figured, well, that happened at 9 o'clock over London. We're going to keep praying. So we did. We figured the problem was much too big for human loss. We were looking straight in the face of evil. There's no doubt about it. And one woman even described her judge at one point. Something came over him, and she could see this slavering wolf head. And then his face came back. And she said, I knew I was dealing with someone who was possessed. I understand that. I was Catholic for 10 years. I know about exorcism. So we decided to call ourselves Mothers of Lost Children, based on the mothers of the disappeared, because it was such an evocative thing. There are many other mothers groups who wear white T-shirts. There are women from Cuba. There are women from Uganda.
The Rose Street women?
No, there's another group from an African country.
Lesotho, Liberia.
The Liberian, yes, and they wore white T-shirts. So we thought, okay, we can follow these women. These women do things. And we started demonstrating. As I say, I don't even like to stand up to talk because my knees shake. But after a while, I'm out there with a bullhorn. Literally a bullhorn that I ordered over the internet. Because we couldn't figure out how to do microphones, There was no place to plug them in front of the White House. So during that time, we've had 10 marches in Washington, D.C. All right, first of all, we started praying, and then these miracles started happening. And we wouldn't have said they were miracles if we didn't look back and add them all up and think, that's not humanly organized, that is divinely organized. We've been joined by professionals who have the political skills that we lack. Kathleen Russell of the Center for Digital Excellence has all of the media skills we lack. Garland Waller walked into our lives and documented this marvelous movie. And most of us lack the self-esteem and the resources that these people have and they brought to us. And so our self-esteem went up. Regular citizens are pitching in now. Regular citizens are knowing this is a social justice issue of our times, the children. And they're doing it with the enthusiasm of civil rights marches. We've educated people who knew nothing. We've educated people who knew nothing about the problem because we went to Fox News in LA a couple years ago, and they did a year-long series, which we have posted, a year-long series of television programs. And we knew it was pure evil because the wonderful man who started that, who had looked into had uncovered the ritual abuse in the McMartin case down in Manhattan Beach in the 80s, was the one who took us on. He said, I know about this kind of evil. And he took it on. And he found himself dead in the bottom of a ravine after a year of it. So we know that we have enemies. We have enemies. But they can't shut us all up. They can shut maybe Martin Burns up, and I want to dedicate my talk to him. But they can't shut us all up. So in our marches in Washington, D.C., after the president failed to answer any of our letters, which we sent him one after another, the only one he answered was after we sent it to his wife, who said, dear, I think you ought to at least answer the letters. And so he had someone send us, thank you for sharing on the Vietnam War type of letter that didn't even speak to our issue. But it didn't matter because that instigated us. That was God's will too, because it instigated us to take the next step and say, all right, we'll come to you. You won't answer our letters, we're coming to your house. You do. And we did. And we showed up in force. And I cannot believe our first march. It was unbelievable. Garland Waller actually videotaped it. And we had a huge banner, and she caught us coming around the corner with this banner waving and these flags waving and people singing. It was amazing. And we kept it up because we knew one time it's not going to do a thing. So we kept it up. If you go to mothersoflostchildren.org, you can see the marches, which Kathy Lee has documented. If it weren't for her little camera, which she used extraordinarily skillfully, we wouldn't have a movement. We would just have had 10 marches, but now we have a documented movement. On the heels of that, we decided, all right, well, as we're here in Washington, D.C., number one, we stumbled upon the suffragist headquarters and discovered that the suffragists, bless their hearts, which we don't call suffragettes. They said, no, that's a diminutive. We call them suffragists. They had a list of like 20, 30 different things they were going to accomplish. And the only one they didn't accomplish was the family problem, that men owned women and children. And they had that on their list. But they couldn't complete that one. That was too hard a nut to crack. Voting, no problem. Employment, no problem. But they couldn't do that one. That was central to the patriarchal society. So we thought, okay, guess that's up to us. We don't know how to do it. We have no idea how to do it. But we're willing, and God certainly knows how to do it. So he'll just, as long as we keep a little Phoebe smoothie, then he'll do it for us. So we did, and we kept coming back. Now we've had business meetings at the biggest, fanciest law firm you've ever seen. Their lobby would hold the Empire State Building. You know, it's just scary. They love us. They love us. They can't believe that this is going on. They are working on the Hague Convention issues. They're just wonderful people. And one of the people who's helping us is, you know, I mean, somebody led to something, led to somebody, somebody to something. And there we were. In 2012, a federal commission to eliminate child abuse and neglect fatalities was established by a Congress that was so dysfunctional, they couldn't even agree where the bathroom was. I mean, you know, no laws got passed. Nothing got passed. But with all the people on the Ways and Means Commission, we visited them, 20 or 40 strong, wearing our T-shirts. This never happens in Congress. I mean, they are so proper. One time, Kathy, we tried to make a joke. We tried to make a joke, and this man looked at her like she was from another planet. I said, I don't think they have a very good sense of humor. So we didn't make jokes anymore, but the whole thing was a joke, because we would show up, and they would try to keep straight faces, but it was very hard to keep a straight face. We had congressional aides weeping with mothers telling their stories from their districts, from their states. We didn't know where it was going. We had no idea. It was like Johnny Appleseed out there, you know. All right, we'll go talk to them. I don't know who they are, but let's go talk to them. And pretty soon this commission came along. Because if they're going to stop fatalities, they're likely to also stop injuries. And we've written to them, and you all can write to them too. I wish you would. It's eliminate child abuse fatalities. Just Google that. Eliminate child abuse fatalities. And write them a little note that they're listening to us. Then, the Violence Against Women Act was reauthorized with a whole section, Section 102, about family court. We were invited to talk. We were invited. They paid for us to come and talk to federal officials whom we had in tears. People were in tears again at the federal level. So they have grants that are to focus on divorce court, including grants for court watch. And that's what scares court watch scares judges most of all. The federal government is now giving grants to court watch. This is terrific stuff. We didn't have any hand in it. We just showed up and said our piece, and then they took it from there. And then the Office of Violence Against Women has established grants to create best practices in 4 of the worst counties ever. They're working in collaboration with these horrible officials to make those just best practices for us. That's brilliant. That's just brilliant. So there are many other things that I consider answers to prayer. So I know that God's listening to us. And he'll listen to your individual prayer. He'll listen to the one-word prayer, which is help, please. He'll bring us to our knees so that we have nowhere else to go. We're crawling on our belly. Only place to go is God. And just like Daryl was. There's no place else to go, really. And I kept thinking, why didn't I start with this? That was really dumb. But I had to be knocked down and trampled on before I would say, okay, I give up. He enters into our lives exactly like he did in ancient times. I mean, if you believe the Bible stories, believe it happens now. And I know that because he's entered into my life in really, really strange ways. Because it turns out, when I was in the middle of my life, when I'm toward the end of my life now, in the middle of my life I went into hypnosis because I couldn't figure out why I couldn't remember half my childhood. What was in there, those blank years? Well, it turns out that my family, for all their proper behavior and look, military family, they were actually a group of people that worshiped evil and used me to do that. And I was used in every way that they could think of. If they could have thought of anything worse, they would have done it. But I was really good at dissociating. And I would have these remarkable experiences in the midst of a circle of men wearing black robes. Staked down in the middle of them was me, or this little kid. And all of a sudden, I would see them, but the men couldn't see me. The ones standing in the circle couldn't see me. And I didn't have a word for it. They were huge, shining people. That's what I called them. And those were, I found out later, were angels. And they would say, and I'm just going to sound a little wah-wah, and you could, take what you like and leave the rest. I've been in 12-step programs for half my life. So take what you like and leave the rest. They would say, not really words, but it would come from inside. Say these words. And I, having nothing left to lose, right? I would say them. In the name of Jesus, I bind and rebuke you. And everybody would stop. It was like a plug had been pulled out of these men who were about to jump on it and do bad things. They would it was like the plug was pulled out. And I'd just somehow wiggle out of the situation. I'd crawl between their legs, I'd crawl upstairs, I'd get in bed, and they wouldn't bother me that night. So I know I've been there. I know that I've been protected. And I know that your children can be protected, and my children can be protected. And all you have to say is real simple. In the name of Jesus, I bind and rebuke you. And it makes them stop. They can't do it anymore. So I would suggest that you say that in court. Maybe quietly to yourself, so that you won't be hauled away, preferably with another person sitting there holding your hand. But I think it'll make a difference. Because bad people can't do bad things. They can't do bad things. And people are both in the name of Jesus.
I couldn't hear what you say. In the name of Jesus?
I bind and rebuke you. That's all. And it's a real simple sentence. And somebody said, what's it mean? I think it means that you're saying to the devil, I'm tying you up and I'm scolding you. Get out of here. You don't belong here. So his name is huge. I had no idea. And they trained me to throw up if I heard that name or if I said that name. So I know it's important. And the bad people train you very vigorously not to be able to say that word, Jesus. It's a real important one. So anyway, we still have the prayer conference call going a good decade later, every night at 9 o'clock, California time. And I'll give you the number if you want the number. We'd love for you to call in. It's Christian-based, so it's a lot, if you're Jewish, you're going to hear a lot of Jesus. But, roll with it. He was Jewish. He had a nice Jewish mama. It's okay.
What is the number?
Okay, I'll give it out now. It's 641-715-3200. And then you have to do an access code, which is 891810#. And if you couldn't get that down fast enough, I'll tell you later. The other thing, and I'm closing, I'd like to say, we didn't have a march this Mother's Day because I just couldn't pull it together. We just had a conference and I was coming here and I just couldn't do it. That's the downside of getting old. The upside is, I'm getting old, I'm not dead. So this is the upside. But anyway, I couldn't quite do it this year, but we're going to have a march in October in Washington, D.C. And we wear our T-shirts, and we march around, and we've got a bullhorn, and if you want to tell your story, you can. And if you want to wear disguise, you can. And and I would, if you have a current case and you have any contact with your child, I would suggest, mustache, whatever you want, One woman wore like a beekeeper outfit, and a hat, a beekeeper outfit, so that you're not identified, because they will retaliate, they don't have any sense of at all. But you're more than welcome, and we need all the bodies we can get there. And we're planning, another group is planning a congressional briefing on what I consider the foundational issue in the United States, which is to end corporal punishment of children. So we're going to coordinate it with that, and we'll all show up at the briefing again. We've actually had 2 briefings on our issue. That's how far we got. Not many congressional people came, but the right ones came, and who knows what's going to come of that. But this will be on ending corporal punishment, and we'll march, and we'll lobby, and we'll put it out there, and we'll pray. So
What weekend? What day? Do you have the date set yet?
I don't know when they're going to plan it, and it won't be till closer, but I'll just keep a little, if you're not on our email list, I'll put your email address on here, and I'll send you emails, updates every month on what's going on, because we don't have very many ways of communicating, and that's one, and it's a constant contact thing, so it's only to you, it's not to, a whole list of people, so your name won't get out there. Your email won't get out there. So anyway, we invite you. And these, for anybody who wants to come to the march, free t-shirt. For anybody who doesn't want to come to the march, free t-shirt.
And also miraculous medal too.
And
That's
miraculous
important.
medal.
Please help yourself.
So, I had a speech. It's all here. But I may move things around a little bit. But the thing that I started thinking about was, why does that happen? Why does it happen and we all get excited and we're all talking about what's going on at ABC, and when ABC goes to cover the Crystal Strelioff story in Chicago, and Chris Cuomo goes there and spends a week, and we hear that ABC Nightline is doing it, everybody's excited, they pull the story. Or there is a story, but oh my God, how did the ex-husband get to be the sympathetic character? So what I've been working on is, okay, I did documentaries, Small Justice, how sexual abusers get custody. People in the media business said to me, it's really too depressing. You open up with this kid talking about being raped by her dad. That's just depressing. We can't put that on the air. So then I thought, well, I'll do a cheerful subject. I'll do one where the father just beat the crap out of the kids and his wife. Will that make everybody happy? She kidnapped her kids and ran to another country. She saved them. She is a hero. Is that what you people call a happy ending? So, all this is going on in my head, and my God bless her darling daughter, Sam, because I gave her a name where she can always be a man or a woman when she applies for a job. Sam, for Christmas, gave me a book called Men Explain Things to Me. And the book is by Rebecca Solnit, S-O-L-N-I-T. And the book grew from an article she wrote called Mansplaining. Now, I'm aware that the men in this room are here and our supporters. God bless you all. But there are some men who are not on our side. And I don't have to tell many of you about that. But the idea behind mansplaining is this. It's the idea that a man will explain something to you that you already know. Again, and again, and again. And so my theory is this. I think the family courts are a lot like mansplaining men who explain to you why you feel the way you do, don't feel the way you do, should do what you do, don't do what you want. It doesn't matter what you do, because whatever you do, there's going to be this judgment that is not about you. It is not about your case. It is not about the children you are trying to protect. You are not heard. So as somebody who spent 17 years in the media, where I had people, I mean, in a way, as a single woman, it was great, because whenever I went to a cocktail party, I was never alone. There was always somebody who wanted to pitch a story. My aunt makes the best apple pie. You should do a story on her. Then when I started doing documentaries, it was, you think that chemical spill was bad? You should see the one in my backyard. So it didn't matter, there was always something to talk about. But the point that began rolling around in my head is, what are we going to do where we can take what we know and craft it so that it can be heard? Now, my belief is the media is dismissive of women in general. I think there's gender bias in the media. I think we have to deal with that. I think we have to call it that. I don't think when you're talking to a reporter you should say, well, you're just gender biased. Don't go there. It won't help you. But I do think that there's a way to approach telling this story. Now, I've totally lost track of all my notes. Give me 1 minute. Oh, because this actually, I have some good points. One of the things I wanted to mention was, I think we need to begin to craft our story. And I do want to open this up at the end for questions and comments so that maybe we can get something going here. That we have to look at the climate, the real climate in America in terms of women's issues. For instance, Gamergate. Some of you have heard of it, some of you haven't. It's about women who created video games, whose lives were threatened, whose children were, that people said, we're going to rape your children, we're going to beat your children, we're going to string you up, just because the women wanted to actually make video games. That was all they wanted to do. They wanted to make educational video games, and the men didn't think they ought to be in the room. Okay, so that was one thing. We've got really bad sexual assault on college campuses. Anybody who has not seen The Hunting Ground should see it. It is a new documentary, I believe it's on HBO now. It is a must-see to understand silencing the victim. So that is important. And I can never talk about sports, but I'm going to talk about sports now. How about Deflategate? Okay, so what we've got here is Tom Brady being penalized 4 games. I know this because I read it, not because I know anything that I'm talking about. He was penalized 4 games for letting the air out of a ball. Ray Rice, on the other hand, kicked the wind out of a woman, knocked her unconscious, and in the beginning, nothing happened to him. So it's kind of like the NFL cares more about balls than brains. So, my dear. Okay. So thank you. So we're going to think about the culture of not listening to women. Now, in one of the articles I wrote for the completely stellar Mo Hanna and Barry Goldstein, in the book that they edited, they asked me, yes. They asked me as a media person to write a chapter on the media. And I've just been having a real bee in my bonnet about why they don't do this story. And as an aside, before I actually get to my notes, you know, my husband is an economist and works for the Joint Economic Committee. We have a safe word, it's derivatives. When I start talking, his safe word is, you know, just stop, because I can kind of go on a tear. But anyway, he's the best, and he co-produced No Way Out But One, so good man, Barry Nolan. Yes, he is the best. But in this chapter, I wrote down a couple of things that I thought were very important things for us to think about, and women who are either advocates or lawyers or victims or to think about when talking to the press. Here's the problem that we have with the press and why they won't cover things. They don't like stories that are hard to understand. In other words, a story's got to be pretty easy to understand. Now, I'm going to go through this list with the hope that when you all think of the stories that you want to tell, you think about, how can I simplify this story? If you have your own case, how can you get everything important into one page that includes your contact information? No kidding, and it can't be size 2 font. It's really, you've really got to. So, stories, and family court stories are hard to understand. They're complicated, everybody's fighting, nobody agrees, and again, they're complicated. There are no clear pros and cons. Mom might look sympathetic, but somebody else can say, well, and if it's an ignorant or an unknowing media person, they may not dig deeper. These are stories that are hard to write. Their mandate is to get both sides. Now, if a woman says, no, don't talk to my ex-husband, he'll kill me, he'll come after me, he'll hurt the children, they will not do the story. No discussion. The stories for media people lack drama. You say, Christ almighty, how much drama do they want, right? But the truth is, when they go to court, they're not seeing the kid, there's no video that goes with anything, so it's hard to put it together, and they're not going to put a video of the child on at dinner time talking about being raped. There are a number of problems. I'm not quite as blasé as I'm pretending to be up here. The stage gives one power. Crimes make better headlines. So if you die, if you're blonde, if you're beautiful, but if you're tired, exhausted, on the run, confused, suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder and not able to put one foot in front of the other or one word in front of the other, you are doomed in terms of talking to the press. It's very hard to do that. So there's a place where you really got to take a step back. You've got to get that one pager, size 10 font, smallest font you can use, and you've got to learn how to tell the key parts of your story, and I'm going to go and help you a little bit with those things too. Legal gets freaked out. Now, how many of you in this room have contacted a reporter who has said, tell the story, I'm going to do your story, I'm going to do your story, and they're in, and you believe them and you trust them. And then they go back to the newsroom, it's gone. It's nixed. It's happened to at least 2 people. Anybody else? A couple of people. Yeah. And what happens here, and so it doesn't matter whether you're a big shot or a small shot, what happens is the story gets kicked up to legal. And that's what people in television and news call it. Hey, legal said no way. And that's what they mean. Legal said no way. What legal says is, oh, can't you do something on that cute little dog that lost a paw? Because nobody's going to sue you. But when there's a husband, wife, and what the worst thing is they call it he said, she said. And one of the biggest hopes we have, by the way, although it totally breaks my heart, is that when the children come of age and they start talking, it's no longer he said, she said. And I don't want to embarrass Jennifer, but Jennifer Collins is here, the daughter of Holly Collins. Yes. And Jennifer is one of the most remarkable spokespeople and one of the most important people in the storytelling because nobody can say to her, well, it's just he said, she said. Because it happened to her. She was hurt when she was a child. Her dad hit her. She's not making it up. It's her story. She owns it. So it's safer than having her mom say all the same things. But that's a tragedy in America, when what we have to do is wait until children are old enough to be on their own and strong enough to tell their stories. People don't want to see sexual abuse at dinner. So there are two things. One is sexual abuse, one is domestic violence and child physical abuse. So sometimes these things all run together. It doesn't matter in terms of the story, because, you know, we love seeing, what was it, Julia Roberts? Sleeping with the Enemy, because she's so pretty and we don't want to see her get hurt. But it's not the same thing as a real woman getting hurt, and it's not the same thing. It's not this is ugly. This is no Julia Roberts showing up the next day with her hair just right. So that is one of the problems. Now, in 2012, my husband Barry Nolan and I finished making No Way Out But One. And up until the time we started shooting with Holly and Jennifer and her brothers and sisters in the Netherlands, I had been trying to raise money, and it's very hard to raise money for documentaries. And what I had to do, part of what I had to do was pitch. That's what we call it in TV, pitch a story. And I realized that if I talked too long, people's eyes glazed over. So I got the pitch down to this. In America, if you beat your wife and abuse your children and then go after custody, most of the time you will get it. One sentence. This documentary is about a brave woman who, after her ex-husband fractured her son's skull, kidnapped her children and ran. She saved them and became a hero to those children. And a 3-judge panel in the Netherlands heard the same evidence that American judges in this country heard, and they granted her protection and asylum. That's the story. So I say to you, how are you going to craft your story? That's under a minute. Now, I'm not saying it's fair. I'm saying those are the rules. Now, what I'd like to do, Joe, would it be okay to just show a couple of minutes of No Way Out But One? Thank you. Okay, so this is just the first 3 minutes of No Way Out But One, 6 minutes of No Way Out But One. And you will see Alan Rosenfeld, you will see Jennifer Collins, you will see Holly Collins, and I will stop talking.
Great.
Over, you hear a pounding the gavel and then a plane. Here you go. There's the plane.
For lunch, we say a short American.
All Holly Collins ever wanted out of life was to just be normal. Part of an all-American family. With a cozy home, happy kids, pets, carefree vacations, the whole 9 yards. Instead, what Holly Ann Collins ended up with was life as an international fugitive. A woman so desperate to keep her children safe, she was willing to leave behind everything she owned, everyone she knew. She became a kidnapper of her own children, hunted by the FBI.
This is what I gave to you guys in the bag. This is very common for children to eat. They like to chew on it.
Holly Ann Collins became the first American to ever be granted asylum on the grounds of domestic violence by the Dutch government.
Thank you.
Her American children, Jennifer and Zachary, would grow up in the Netherlands to become poised young adults. Jennifer studies at the University of Leiden. Zachary is in a band. And their younger brother, American-born Christopher, has become a champion cyclist. Holly would have more children and live a simple, safe, and relatively happy life in the Netherlands. A small miracle, really, considering how it all started.
I was naive. I thought if you were a good person, if you went to church, if you were a good mom, if you took care of your kids, if you told the truth, then it would be okay. I mean, even to the very end. The day we walked into court, my lawyer said, this doesn't look good, this doesn't look good. And I said, no, it's got to be okay. We're telling the truth. And I believe in God. And I went to church and I went, and then when the judge was reading his order, the first line of his order, it said, the court found there was abuse. Thank God. They believe us. They know the children are telling the truth. And then he said, but, because of the abuse, the mom's crazy, so can you take the kids away?
The decision to modify custody was very, very difficult, as it is evident the respondent, Mrs. Collins, and the children love each other greatly. However, the evidence is overwhelming that the children are at great physical and emotional risk if they remain in respondent's care.
On December 22nd, 1992, after 5 days of testimony in a Hennepin County, Minnesota courtroom, Judge Michael Davis told Holly Ann Collins that he was taking away her 2 children, Jennifer and Zachary, and giving sole custody to her ex-husband. The finding that domestic violence had in fact occurred did not help her case, and the medical evidence that she presented of the injuries she said her children had received at the hands of their father, in fact, had hurt her case. Though the details of Holly's flight and her asylum are singular, what happened to her and her children in court happens every day to battered women and frightened children in family courts all across America. Attorney Ellen Rosenfeld of Colorado has been representing mothers desperately seeking to keep their children safe for over 25 years.
What's extraordinary is that she was one of the small number of moms who had the courage to challenge the private court system, and then she's one of the smaller numbers from those who defied the system, who stayed hidden and safe with their children for as long as she did. What makes it different is that she ended up being granted refugee status in a European country. But the failure of the court system, tragically, that's ordinary.
Based in Washington, D.C., Greg Jacob is a highly successful labor lawyer who does pro bono work for the organization Justice for Children.
There is no question that judges across the country have placed children in danger, have led to the deaths of children, have led to children being abused because of bad decisions in cases.
Okay, thank you.
In the beginning, he only hit me. He used to say that if I would just follow his rules, then he wouldn't have to hit me.
This was in my opinion, I felt very honored to be trusted by Holly Collins to tell her story, which I think was a powerful and important one that I think will help and continue to help many mothers and their children. And by the way, there is a free copy of the DVD for everybody in this room. I believe it's outside. So let me sort of tie this back in with what we're talking about in terms of how we move forward. Every week, I get a story from a different mother with reams of documents saying, please do a documentary on my case. And I can't. It took an enormous amount of time and money to get that, and it's very hard to get these out. And I'll tell you something else, not everybody sees them. This one was one that aired on the documentary channel, but you know, this is a group of like-minded citizens. There are a lot of people who have never heard of this issue. So one of the things that I'm concerned about is, how do we get the story out there in a bigger way? Now, one idea that I have is that it's probably going to have to come from somebody like Mariska Hargitay of Law and Order SVU. You know, there's a woman who I think learned from her scripts what was going on in the courts, and she's been there have been several episodes. One is called Legitimate Rape, where it was the Todd Aiken basically rip-off story where a woman got raped, but the judge heard an expert who said, well, you know, women can't get pregnant. In rape, women can't get pregnant. And that was our real senator. That was Todd Aiken. So that was based on a real story. And in this particular episode, the Mariska Hargitay character helps the woman and her baby escape. It's the last 30 seconds of the show, but it said to me, our pal Mariska, okay. Now, by the way, I don't think you can all write to her with your story, because she's not going to do it. In fact, I teach with somebody who was on staff at Law and Order SVU, and that's not how it works. So we got to come up with another plan. I also want to mention Patrice Lenowitz, who is doing wonderful work with Kelly Rutherford and getting stories of children and justice out there. We need to do much more of that, and we need to be supportive of that. But again, it's one of these things where you guys work like crazy, get a story out there, yay, 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 and then nothing. So, okay, now, so here are some suggestions that I have for us. And so I'll go through them and see if they work for you. The first thing is this. We can no longer only talk about ourselves. We can no longer, ever, have it be one story. Ever. Do not ever talk about your case or a case that you're promoting without putting it in the national context. Period. Because, it is the single most important thing that we do as a group. And as Alan was terming it earlier, movement. I think we need to think of ourselves here as part of a movement that is, we've been doing the groundwork. Now it's time for us to get a little traction here. But I think we're getting really ready. So put your story in national context. By that I mean, tell a sentence or two about this story of yours, and then say, my story, or this story, is like thousands of other stories in America, from Maine to California. Loving mothers, not mothers, loving mothers are losing custody of their children to men who beat them and their children. We cannot have this anymore in America. Say that together. In America. Okay, because really, that's the point. You don't want to be, and you can't be crazy. You can't be shrill. Do you feel it in your heart? Yeah, go home and do what, who is it? Howard Beale in broadcasting, I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore. Do that, but at home. Don't do it where people can hear it. Be sane. If it kills you, be sane. Be organized. And that's the other thing. Be organized. Have national statistics right in your back pocket. 58,000 children a year are made to live with people who they say sexually or physically abused them. That's according to the Leadership Council. Take a look at the Leadership Council website, you say. Send them there. Send them to the statistics. Get them so that they become educated. And you especially do that with reporters. Now, I have another theory, so it's a sidetrack over here. I have another way to talk to reporters. It may work, it may not. We're going to see real soon. But I say to reporters, listen, this is your chance for a Pulitzer. Because the reporter that breaks the story the way the Globe magazine broke the Catholic priest scandal story, that's a Pulitzer. Oh, and by the way, the person who really broke that story was a woman who worked for an underground newspaper. But the Globe will come out with a new movie soon, so yeah. I'm blanking on the name. Kristen Lombardi, God bless her wherever she is now. So national statistics. Be reasonable when you talk to the press. Take a deep breath before you make the phone call. Be calm, be reasonable, and say good dads matter to everybody. Don't talk about all men. Don't talk about your ex-husband who beat everybody by himself. Say, you know what? We need good fathers. Good fathers are great. What we don't need is men who beat people up. Now, the other thing you want to do, and this is a strategy we use in the media business, what you want to do with anybody you're talking to in the media is get them to be on your side. And the way you do that is to get them to agree with you on something. Now, they're not going to agree with you about how bad your ex-husband is. But if you can say to them, my feeling is that when men rape their children, or when they beat their children and break their arms, I just don't think they ought to have custody of those children. Do you? At least be on the same page. If the reporter says, well, you're done with him or her anyway. But most people will be human enough to say, No, I don't think people who do that ought to get custody. So, a few more little tips. Don't lump all divorces together. These cases are not all divorce cases, and it's the first thing that reporters think about. So these are about domestic violence, child abuse, sexual abuse cases, not all divorce. So way early, say, this is not about divorce. Because most couples, even if they hate each other, they try to work out what's best for the kids. This is about cases where people beat each other up or rape children. So you bring it back. Do not lump them together. General tips. Do not ever exaggerate. You will get caught. It's like my mother used to tell my brother, Johnny, there are two kinds of people in this world. The kind that get caught and the kind that don't get caught. The sooner you realize you're the kind that gets caught, the happier your life is going to be. So, there you go. Do not lie or bend the truth. And frankly, pretty much try not to say anything where you don't have a piece of paper that 100% supports what you're talking about. Simplify your story, we talked about that. One thing that I think has been enormously helpful when I've talked to people in the press is to quote Andrew Vax, who used the term growing your own victim. And it sends chills down people's spines, because I say, you see, that's what batterers and abusers have learned to do. And especially pedophiles. They've learned to grow their own victim. If they rape a stranger child, they'll go to jail. If they rape their own child, they'll get custody. People don't like that. They don't like it. So that's important. Also, tell them good news. Share Dr. Joanna Silberg's turned around cases. Say, look, sometimes the right thing is done. So that's something that you really want to do. I would say one of the things that we most need in this movement is a list of all the people who in the media who have been contacted, their phone numbers, their addresses, their emails, and we don't have to write and be nasty to any of them. We just need a list. So we can start shaming, because I frankly think it's about goddamn time. So I feel like I've spent the last 10 years trying to talk reasonably to the press. I have a list a mile long. Oh, they get really interested and then they do nothing. So I'm bitter, which doesn't really help. But I do think if we had a database, if we had people that we've approached and then have their names up there. For instance, I tell people about Nicholas Kristof. I think Nicholas Kristof writes the best op-ed pieces of anybody on the planet. But you know what? He's done a lot about the kids in Thailand. He's done a lot about the kids all over the world. He has not done anything on the children in this country who are given over to sexual abusers. Nothing. The closest he came was the Dylan Farrow story. And he did not follow up, and neither did anybody on the New York Times. Okay, name it. Now, I wanted to mention some good news, because I think this is good news. The Daily Show, my hero, Jon Stewart. I'm going to miss him, crocodile tears. Did anybody see Parenting with the Enemy? Google it. Make sure you see it. Samantha Bee, Parenting with the Enemy. She did a big story for us on how rapists can get custody of their kids. She did it, all with humor. Something that I seem to have lost long ago, but somebody out there can do it. Now, so I feel like our job is to present stories simply, clearly, honestly, and without anger. And I think that's a hard thing to do. I wanted to talking to my aunt the other day, and I said, you know what, on this issue, I toggle between exhaustion and fury. And she said, oh, honey, don't worry. The gotta get even will get all the bad people. And I just love that expression, the gotta get even. So I'm hoping. But what I want us to do is learn to speak truth to power in simple, clear ways. And I want to call out people by name, whether they're judges, whether they're lawyers, whether they're journalists. We need names. And if anybody's going to do this, don't make it a crazy site. Don't make it with the red things going crazy. Be lavender. You know, be cool, as they say. So I want to end with something that I remembered from years and years ago, which was a book called All I Really Need to Know I Learned in Kindergarten. And it said, one of the rules was, when you go out into the world, watch out for traffic, hold hands, and stick together. And I would like to say to all of us here today, let's hold hands and stick together. Thank you. Questions or comments, I'm happy to take them. We've got a few minutes, right? Excuse me, Mo? 15 minutes, okay.
Okay. My name is Betsy Keller. I worked in public relations for over 20 years. I just finished 4 years of litigation where my abused ex-husband was given sole legal and physical custody. I was given 43% parenting time as a concession, so he wouldn't have to pay me child support. So I drove my kids out the time with no money. I've been working pro bono with the Stop Abuse campaign. By training, and I've done PR, and I've done difficult stories about health and science and medicine. I came to Barry, we just had lunch, and I said, I want to create a database of all the cases, because what I have been working on for the past year, I write pitch after pitch in my house. I'm a freelance journalist, public relations. I'm working on a pitch right now to a major television network show, because I have a connection. Guess this is another little PR tip. Find a connection who went through a bad divorce. They'll listen to you.
Right.
Okay?
Absolutely.
So I have an email to the major producer, custody battle, and I've been working on this pitch for a week, and I keep turning it over. Guess what? This is right, every pitch I've ever written. I had a 3-part series promised to me in the local paper to blow Connecticut judicial system out of the court, Fairfield County, wealthiest county in America. Guess what? The lawyers know. I have 500 pleadings in my case. My case went on and on and on. My investor, our husband, has money for his lawyer.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. You know, it's very possible that you all could be the answer to a great big prayer that just kind of happened today.
Maybe have 20,000 people visiting their site a month, read their posts.
This is really great, and if I know that what you're doing is huge, but boy, it would also be great if you could add something about the, you know, if these people want a question about have you tried to approach the media, if so, who?
I would like to create the story.
Yeah.
This
This would really be great. Thank you so much for saying something, and thank you for your work. And thank you for the Stop Abuse campaign. That's really, really great. Yes.
Hi, so my name is Teresa. I have two comments and suggestions, and I've suggested this in the past, and I think we do the suggestion again. Number one, when there are cases in the media that are positioned as something other than domestic violence, but where we know that it is domestic violence, I think it's our responsibility to write op-eds or to have the media respond to it in a way to call it out for what it is. So, for example, George Zimmerman, you know, Elliot Rodger, the serial killer in San Diego, these are all cases where if you look deeper in the articles that follow up, there's always some level of domestic violence in the past, and you know, the media doesn't portray it as such. So that's one example. The other is I wish that the organizations, advocacy organizations, would actually respond to cases, celebrity cases such as the Sarah McKenna case, and actually talk about it in a way that gives their opinion that this is an issue that's relevant to all of us. So you guys know who Sarah McKenna is?
You know,
she's the girlfriend or ex-girlfriend of Bodie Miller. So if anybody saw the Bodie Miller case, I don't know.
yes, I can't really speak to it with any kind of intelligence, but I do know that he was the one that came out smelling like a rose, and he got custody of the kid.
Right, so basically they had a relationship in California where they met. It was like a 2-week relationship. She got pregnant, and then she moved to New York.
And they were not married.
And they were not married, and her case is very pivotal if you read the news about it. She was basically lambasted by the judge in California for even leaving the state as a pregnant woman. And so she lost custody in New York,
right.
Appealed to the appellate division, lost, and then it wasn't until she got to the Court of Appeals that now they have joint custody. But anyway, look her up, Sarah McKenna.
It's a good story. Thank you. Other comments? Yes.
My name's Jennifer.
Would you stand up, please, and speak a little?
My name is Jennifer, and I'm from Florida, and you touched on it a little bit. And when you said that there are successes, and that's one of the reasons I'm here, is because I am a success, and my daughter is a success. And I want to introduce myself to you, and if you want to come up to me, I'll give you a hug. It can happen. It can happen. It should not take as long as it took me for it to happen. It took 8 years. It should not have taken that long. Holly should not have had to leave the United States. You all should not be going through what you're going through. Your children should not be suffering.
I really appreciate your saying that, and yes, I'd like to add something to that too about the length of the battle and the cost of the battle. I think people are shocked to hear how much money it costs to protect a child in family court. So getting those figures, you know, people think, oh, you know, if a woman loses custody of the kids, what's the matter with her? And it needs to be moved around to be an economic issue, that the custody very often goes to the one with the most money. And those are not poor people. Those are people with money. So it needs to be shifted a little bit. I think we have time for 1 or 2 more comments. Yes?
Not a comment, just a question. I wonder why documentaries are not done on judges who don't use good common sense.
I can tell you why. I can give you an answer, and that's why we've all had to be so careful. First of all, judges are protected by the legal system. They don't have to talk. Their excuse can always be, I can't talk about the case because it's ongoing, which, as we all know, these cases go on forever. So that's partly the protection. It's almost impossible to go after a judge or go after one of the lawyers. Now, Hera McLeod went after the psychologist who granted her ex-husband visitation, and during that visitation he killed the child, and she sued that psychologist and won $500,000. So, you know, you can go after them, but the judges and the lawyers are pretty tough to call, and that's another thing that the media won't do. We know we're going to get sued. We know it's going to be a hassle. Most media don't have the money to certainly not any independent producer. And that's why one of the things too with No Way Out But One, we didn't say anything we couldn't prove. And Holly had been phenomenal at saving important documents. We also had the FBI documents. Holly was kind enough to open up the FBI file for us, so we were able to, the fathers' rights groups tried to go after Holly and my husband, really, and I think Jennifer will agree, he's the best. And he really went after him hammer and tong, and so they went away. But we were very careful, very careful. Yes?
There are 4 mothers in Rhode Island who filed a federal lawsuit in the District of Massachusetts against the Family Court of Rhode Island, Superior Court of Rhode Island, attorneys, judges, guardian ad litem, therapists, class action lawsuit, and more disrespectfully. I have information that goes with that.
Can you give us just so everybody here can hear either your name or something?
My name is Mary Howard. I'm actually a psychotherapist in West Derby, Rhode Island, and I'm here trying to learn about advocacy.
Wonderful, thank you very much. Yes.
Hi, I'm Quimby Wilcox, and I guess I'm going to take this opportunity. I represent, there are 7 million Americans living abroad, and if you think you have problems, you know, in the courts here, it's going on everywhere, try and do it in a foreign language that you don't understand. And sometimes against even worse social norms than we have in the United States. And I'm advocating for Americans living abroad. I'm fighting the State Department. I'm up on Congress trying to get some support for my fight against the State Department, because the consulates, they have it all on the books. It's under federal law. It's in their guidelines. They're supposed to be assisting Americans abroad. They don't do anything.
Quimby is doing extraordinary work. I'm sure many of you have seen her website or gotten her emails. Thank you for this. Okay, I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak with you. It has been a pleasure to be here. I will not be able to stay long. My stepson is graduating from Boston University tomorrow morning, and I have to get back on the train. But I wanted to be here with you all, so thank you so much.
Discloses sexual abuse to the daycare provider and to myself, and I'm in shock. It's like I would wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning. That would just shoot me straight out of the bed, and I could still see that scene of him bringing her down the stairs like that, and thinking, my God, he was doing it right in front of my face, and I didn't even get it. I thought she actually got sick. Can you imagine? Because we didn't hear about sexual abuse back then, and so it was just like he had that smirk on his face, like of O.J. Simpson, like I just raped your daughter and you don't even get it. So in the meantime, my daughter discloses. My sister is a nurse at Children's Hospital, and I asked her, I said, what she's told me and what should I do? She says, take her to her pediatrician in the morning. First ask her what happened down there, and if she repeats the same thing, take her to her pediatrician. But don't mention her dad's name, just see if she repeats the same thing, and then take her. So that's what I did, and that's when social services gets involved, and this is where my nightmare begins, and a lot of these cases it does. So social services is involved, and they have a psychologist on the case, and the psychologist, after about 5 sessions, comes out of a session with my daughter and said, yes, she is being sexually abused, and she's been exposed to sexual stimuli. She's 2.5 years old. And it was just like, the feeling of a mother or anybody with their child to hear that, even though you know it's going on at this point, to hear that professional tell you, yes, it is going on. And then I take her to social services for a visit with her father, which was a minimal. He had supervised visits for a very short time. And as I walk in,
I'm looking through this glass window, and I see him in there with my daughter, and he's the perfect dad, I promise. You look at him, he's intelligent, he's charismatic, he's charming, he's good looking, and he wasn't the boogeyman behind the bushes. He wasn't hiding out grabbing this child. And I'm looking at that and going, wow, this is going to be hard. But the bottom line is my daughter's very articulate. She's been talking spontaneously and told lots of people what's happening to her. And I've got a psychology report stating abuse, and a babysitter who spends all her time with her stating there's abuse. So, they're going to listen to the child. That's my first, absolutely, they'll listen to the child. So that day I'm met by a GAL, guardian ad litem for the child, lawyer for the child, which, if you don't know, and I didn't at the time. And she meets me with disdain. I mean, just almost pure hatred. The first time she's met me, and I'm thinking, I'm holding back and looking at her, and she says, I have 4 things I want to discuss with you, and I want you to go into social services. They have a conference room and discuss these 4 things. And I think, well, I can deal with this. I've dealt with a lot up to this point, and I can deal with these people. Well, that was a mistake. I go in, and they interrogated me like I'd never even seen on TV before in Law and Order movies. I mean, just, why would your daughter continue to say this if you weren't coaching her? Because maybe it's going on. And then the next question would be, I'm going to have you do a psychological evaluation. I'm going to have him do a psychological evaluation. Good. Then maybe we'll get to the bottom of this. And maybe we'll find out about you. And I'm thinking, oh, wow, this is bad. And then the next thing was, I want you to do separation counseling. And I'm thinking, separation counseling? I mean, I have spent 2 years of my life getting away from this man. He's stalked me. He called me 12 times a day at work. He's never left me alone. And now you're going to have me go sit in the same room with him, and he's, abusing a child. I was thinking to myself, I didn't say this to her. This is all I'm thinking of. This is nuts. And then the next thing was, I said, well, what about Dr. Baker's report? And she looks at me, she says, Dr. Baker's report does not state there's any abuse. And I'm thinking, am I going crazy? I mean, I just read the report, and she just came out and told me, yes, your daughter's being abused. I said, have you met with a babysitter who's been in my child's life? She hadn't even met with a babysitter. She never met me. She'd been on the case for 3 months. That's where I say these people go behind the scenes, these sociopaths, and they manipulate the court system while you're sitting there trying to protect your child. And then she says, this is parental alienation syndrome. And I'm like, parental alienation? I said, I've been over backwards for this man to be in her life. I had a great relationship with my own father, and I want her to have a chance to have the same. And then she says, this child's going into foster care. And I've never been away from my baby. I mean, she's my life. I'm the sole caretaker. I go into another room, and I sat down, and I'll still cry to even tell this story today. I laid my head on a desk, and I cried like somebody just ripped my heart and soul out of me. And social worker comes up to me coldly and taps me on the shoulder and says, you can go say goodbye to your daughter now. And I got up, and it was a gray mist around me, and my legs were quivering. I couldn't feel them. I know I was in shock. And I could hear them in the background going, look at her, she can't handle it. She can't say goodbye to her daughter. And I just kind of put my arm out to the side, and I said, oh, yes, I can, because I wanted to make sure that my baby knew I wasn't going to be there, and at least to say goodbye to her, because I didn't know what was going to happen. So I go to say goodbye to her, hold it together, get the tears moved away, and they had the police escort me out that day. She's now placed in foster care, and I've driven to the psychologist's office that stated she was being abused, and she said, my God, I had an idea they'd do something like this, and I told them, absolutely not. So I'm looking out of the city of Denver, Colorado, the lights, and I'm wondering where my baby is. Who has her? What does she think's going on? What is going to happen? And she's doing so poorly in that foster care home that they remove her from that foster care home and put her in with her daycare provider, who is also a foster care parent, and which was a good move, because at least it was with somebody she knew. And at that point, my daughter's waking in the night screaming out. She'd be arching her back 6 inches off the bed, screaming out, no, Daddy, don't, owie, owie, it's bad. 5 and 6 times a night you're up with her. I knew this because I had done it the previous 3 months. And I begged social services, just come witness what my child goes through in a night. I'll pay you, just you have to see this. And obviously they couldn't do that, but the daycare provider is going through this. And then my daughter is displaying sexual behaviors with another little boy at the daycare in a playhouse, and wanting him to do, stick it here, behavioral things. And she says, you've got to do something with what this baby's going through. You know, and they said, well, we're going to put her in another foster home. She says, you do that, you will kill this baby. She needs her mommy. So they put her back in my home. But under the pretense with lots of these mothers, they put the child back in your home, but you're kind of told, don't bring up the abuse again. Do not mention it. Keep it under wraps, or you're going to lose your child again. You've been threatened now. So during this time, more evidence is coming out on abuse. And I have one night it's a long story, so I'm not going to go into it, but I picked my daughter up and I put a voice-activated tape recorder by her bed at night to record those cries. And on this time, she tells in detail what her dad's doing to her, and a police detective comes in to investigate the next day. And I knew that I could possibly lose my child for bringing in any kind of police or anything like that, but I had to do what was right by her. And this policeman comes in, and within 15 minutes, and I believe the police need to investigate these cases, he came in 15 minutes, my daughter told him more stuff than she'd ever told me in detail. And it took a diagram of a male child and a female child, or a male and then a female, and he said, in any way I ever touched her in a way that made her feel funny or uncomfortable, my daddy did. Where does he touch you? My pee-pee, my bottom. What is he touching you with? It's red and it's hard and it hurts. And she called it a peanut. And what she discussed the night before with me was in more detail, so I thought she was talking about food. She's talking about a peanut. Long story, she ends up drawing on the diagram. She's 3 years old, circles the anal area and the vagina, and then turns around and says, circles the red around the penis of where she'd been touched and what with. And there was a lot more information in that. He tells me he's going to have the DA involved, and this was going to be a long uphill battle against social services, but I didn't know what I was in for even yet. So I have a hearing coming up, and that detective does come in to testify. The daycare provider, the psychologist that states she was being abused, all this information comes out in this hearing, but the judge ignores it all. They won't allow, they don't listen to the evidence, and instead, in the best interest of the child, the father was more able to nurture the relationship with the mother and child than the mother was able to nurture that relationship with the father and child, and I lost custody. I remain with 50% visitation. Just recently in Colorado, we had Senate Bill 129 that a lot of us fought desperately to not let that get passed. It's more of a father's rights bill. What it does is automatically has these judges be able to give 50% to the parents. When you're in a contested custody case, most of these cases are abuse cases, so you do not want that person to get 50% of the time off the bat. The day that judge handed my ex, or the father, 50% of the time with her and sole decision-making power, he handed me to him on a silver platter. Now that man has that coercion and control. The very thing he always wanted was now just handed to him. The abuse continues. I have 2 new attorneys to appeal everything that happened, and the abuse continues, and there's more evidence that's coming out. My daughter has a severe discharge, severe, and she's in pain. And if I take her to the doctor, I'm going to lose her. But it's a catch-22. You either take this child, you're legally responsible to, or you don't, and you're not protecting that child, but you may lose her. So I have these new attorneys. They said, well, Marilee, you got to take her. And I called the previous policeman. He said, take her to Humana Hospital to the emergency room the next time you come up with this, that she comes up and she's in pain like this. And I did. And at that point, my daughter had physical evidence. Now she has lacerations on the inside, abrasions, 8mm opening, and is returned to her father within a day. She used to say to me, Mommy, has it stopped? Have you stopped it? And I'd say, yeah, I think I have. Oh, I dread ever saying those words to her. So what I did now is I'm geared. I'm going. I've testified before Congress. There's a mom that'll be here tomorrow, protected mom, Dr. Amy Newstein, who set up a congressional hearing in New York when we testified before Congress. There was about 10 mothers from across the nation. Now, we didn't have the internet. We didn't have a way to connect the way you guys do here today. But after I spoke at that congressional hearing, I thought I was all alone in this. And I was with 10 other mothers that could have been me speaking. So I realized I wasn't alone. That empowers you. So that's the huge empower we have here. These kind of conferences gives these women empowerment. So I end up getting a lot of documentation. That's what I was telling you, is I got a big black binder, legal binder, and I put all my court documents, only the important ones, pertinent ones, not a bunch of nonsense. You want to get right to the direct line, because once I did that, I knew my case better than anybody. and you are your child's own best advocate. So you need to have everything documented and ready to go and in order, so your ducks are all in a row. And at that point, I would go to the DA, the Kemp Center, the governor of Colorado. Kemp Center was a national sexual abuse center in Colorado, and I was working every avenue I could work to free my child. And then I started lobbying in Washington, D.C. And now, by this point, I have 3 police reports, 3 doctor's reports, hospital reports from the top doctors in the state of Colorado stating my child's being abused. And the judge on the case is sitting on the case doing nothing. He will do nothing. I start lobbying in Washington, D.C. with a huge law firm in Washington. It was called Verner Lipford, McPherson & Hand. And they would set my appointments on the Hill. And the reason I was able to do that is because I was in management with the airlines. I went back to flying to free up my time, so that way I could work this as a full-time job. So I would fly to Washington, D.C., and I'd go to the law firm, and then they'd set my appointments up on the Hill. I'd lobby all day, come back, put my uniform on, and go back to work. On this one occasion, I'm at the airport. I've just finished lobbying, and I call my attorneys, and I get on the phone, and the paralegal's like high-pitched voice, she's going, Marilee, there's an emergency hearing right now on your case, and they're taking your daughter away from you. I said, what? They can't do this. I'm not even present. I'm not even in the state. How can they do this? She said, Marilee, they're taking your daughter away from me. I have to go. And I said, you tell my attorneys not to take that phone call. I'm not even present. She goes, Marilee, it's a judge. They have to take the call. And I knew that moment I'd lost my baby after all this. And I went and got on the airplane. And when I got into the lavatory, when those engines roared, I promise you, I roared like a lion all the way home. So now I have supervised visits 1 hour a week. Now, I had supervised visits 1 hour a week for 8 years. I got moved to 2, by the way. But I was treated as a hardened criminal. Your criminals do not go through the supervision that I went through. So I'm meeting with the DA during this time and trying to get him to help. And I go in to meet with the DA, and I have my attorney with me this day, and I decided maybe it's the way I look, that I'm not credible because of the way I look. So I'm going to wear a man's gray Pendleton suit, and a starchy white shirt and a little narrow black tie and slick my hair back, and I'm going to be like a guy, and maybe they'll listen to me. See, I knew what gender bias was. I didn't know, but obviously I was picking up on it. And I go into the DA's office, and I'm going through the metal detectors, and I set them off. And I go, oh, and I have my attorney with me. He doesn't know I'm wired. I go, oh, must be my wire under my bra. And joke around about it and get through the metal detector. Of course, I wired the DA that day. I had it all on tape, and he believed. I said, Gallagher, look at this case. Look at this notebook. I said, you have 1/10 the evidence in cases that you prosecute. You can prosecute this case. Why are you not prosecuting the case? He said, Marilee, I believe your child's being abused. But let's see what Judge Michael Beatty does, and if he takes that child away from you, we will step in and do something. And he never did. And I did lose my child completely. And on Beatty's order, I go in, it's all of a sudden he has this order that he wants to read, and normally the mothers are on one side of the courtroom and all the professionals are on the other side, and you're kind of there by yourself. And I'm with my attorney this day, and my case was a sexual assault case, although the courts of Colorado stated there was no sexual abuse in this case. When they had files in those days, every file in my case, which we're talking hundreds because I went through this for 10 years, were stamped sexual assault letters, sexual assault case, sexual assault case. However, there's no sexual abuse in this case. 3 minutes, oh shoot, I'm gonna have to cut this. So anyway, I end up, he ends up, I'm losing it. Well, anyway, I lose the DA's, I have all that information on tape, and then I have a rally at the Capitol. This is the one thing I just want to get out is, I'm going to skip a bunch of stuff here, but during this time, I met with Joan Pennington, who was an attorney in this, and she was the guru in all this, and I want to give her all the credit for what's happened here today and how this has moved forward, because she was a domestic violence survivor. The father, her husband, had beat her in one eye until it went blind, and then he started her other eye, and she would sit on the Capitol steps in New Jersey with her 5 kids and ask for help. She went to law school. She kept getting cases and calls from mothers like myself, and she thought they were crazy. And we decided to put this rally together at the Capitol. And when we did, it was incredible grassroots effort. And we had attorneys coming in from across the nation that were very big in this. So it was like Alan Rosenfeld and Garnet Harrison. And she had Louise Armstrong, who is the author of Kiss Daddy Goodnight. And she's one of the biggest first feminists in this. And Gloria Steinem read a letter. And we had musicians, and I had speakers in the trees. And it was an incredible rally. And the mothers that came in from every state were there. And the speeches were incredible. And what I want to say, as Joan said, at first we took a list of the mothers going through this, and we realized that we need to take a list of judges. And today, we're going to start taking a list of those judges. And the first judge on that list is going to be that of Marilee McLean's judge, who sentenced her child to a lifetime of abuse. And this is for you, Amy, and her fist goes in the air. And then she said, this is like, I had every media station there, so I had lots of media coverage. And when she says, this is like the Civil Rights Act of the 60s, this is the movement of the 90s. We're in 2015. Where are we? And she said, it's taken them 20 years to listen to domestic violence. We do not have another 20 years for them to listen to this issue. Look where we are. We're still trying to get people to listen to this issue. And when I got up to speak, I hadn't really planned to speak because I was so busy planning the rally. But when I first started speaking, was at a law school, and I was real shy, soft, nice voice. And by the time you heard me at this speech, you would not know I was the same woman. I was passionate. My voice was so strong that it was guttural. I mean, you could hear, I said, why are women going to jail? Why is the protective parent being punished? Why are mothers going into the underground? I know the answers to these whys. The pain is unbearable. For God to take your child away can in time be accepted as the will of God. For the laws, social services, and perpetrators to do the same is the will of the system. And, and a mother's first instinct is to protect her child, and when the means and power to do this are stripped unjustly from a mother, there are no words that can describe the constant heartache that is felt as each day passes by. Our children's dreams have turned into screams, and their prayers into fears. It is time to listen to the children. And one mother after another, and it was just a really great rally. And so I just wanted to go on to Joan, and my main thing is I think the moms need to get to the media, and that's kind of what I discussed last night. We've got incredible work going on. We've got so many people doing the right thing. We've got Barry Goldstein's book, Mo's, my book. I didn't even mention my book. My book is an educational tool for this, for moms to educate judges and lawyers. This is a case study. I'm not doing this out here to make money. This is my passion. I want to see a difference. So that book can be utilized to give to people, to educate them on what's happening, to show, because it gives the research and the legal behind it. You've got Stop Abuse. You've got CPPA, California Protective Parents Association, with Connie Valentine, been working on this for years, and legislation with Kathleen Russell. You've got Mothers of Lost Children. We have the organizations out there, and I believe we need to put an umbrella over all those organizations, and we all need to go to the media at the same time, because this is smoldering under our feet. And until we get to the media, until people get educated out there what's happening, they aren't hearing this. They're not going to hear this. So that's my avenue. God bless the moms and the children out here and for the safety of them, and God bless all of you, and thank you for coming. Up to me afterwards and said, gosh, there needs to be a book written on this, and I forgot to mention my book. So this is the book. It's out there, so if you want to get it autographed or whatever, it's out there for sale. Thank you.
I thank you for inviting me, and I just want to say that this is really a matter that's very close to my heart. And if you want to know how I started my work, it was also because of the traumas of my own life, of my own childhood. Not so much related to being a woman, but related to being Jewish. Because my parents and I was born in Vienna in Austria, and at a time, I see people behind you. Yes. It's a little bit. Okay, now we got it. Okay. Now you've got me. Okay. As I said, it was because of traumas in my own life, not related to being a girl or woman, I was a child, but to being Jewish. And my parents and I, when the Nazis took over in my native Vienna, we were basically hunted with license to kill. And it was only by a miracle that we were able to escape. And I grew up in the industrial slums of Havana. And it was there that I learned that most of my extended family, aunts, uncles, grandparents, cousins, had been killed by the Nazis, as would have happened to us had we not by a miracle been able to escape from the Holocaust. So the issue of trauma is something that I've very much experienced and I've also observed. And of course those experiences led me to questions that I'm sure most of us here have asked. Does it have to be this way? Does there have to be so much cruelty, so much violence, so much injustice? And that really was the genesis of my, what are now 4 years, 4 decades, excuse me. I'm sorry, I've got an allergy. And it is really plaguing me today. So hopefully as I talk, my voice is beginning to come back. So that's really what led me to what are now 4 decades of multidisciplinary, cross-cultural, historical research on trying to understand how we can build a better future. And of course, I didn't start that research, for many, many years after my childhood, but it was all after another pivotal experience, not quite as traumatic by any means. In fact, it was an awakening experience where this was during the late 60s, where suddenly, along with thousands of other women, I woke up as if from a long drug sleep to realize that many of the problems that I thought were me, something wrong with me, something personal, were really social problems, because I shared them with all these other women. We were doing consciousness raising at the time. And so when I started my study, I really took into account the whole of humanity, unlike most studies, which are quite aptly called the study of man, right? And then we're told, don't worry, man includes woman. Actually, in English, woman includes man. But that's not the point. The point is that if you really look at only part of the picture, you can't see the configurations. And that's what led me to understand that this ignored, it's really the elephant in the room, the status of women, and whether women and men and the so-called feminine and masculine are equally valued, or whether women and the so-called feminine are devalued, is key to everything in our society. Family, we don't know whether it's more democratic or authoritarian, politics, economics, education, everything. And that led me to the understanding of these patterns, these configurations. There were no names for them, so I called one the domination system and the other one the partnership system. So that, in a nutshell, is how I came to do the work I do. And I should add that because my training is both as a social and systems scientist and as an attorney, when I first got involved in the women's movement of the women's liberation movement of the late 60s, early 70s, I naturally used my legal training to really work on changing laws. I wrote a friend of the court brief at the time to the Supreme Court of the United States, making the then radical argument that women should be considered persons under the purview of the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. And I founded the first center in the United States on women in the law, wrote the only paperback book, which is unfortunately still relevant, on the Equal Rights Amendment. It was called the ERA Handbook, and actually you can still get it online through iUniverse or through the Center for Partnership Studies. Like it's not through iUniverse, through Amazon, really. And I also wrote a book drawing from my experiences as an attorney called Dissolution, No Fault Divorce, Marriage, and the Future of Women. And I really understood at that time how skewed the system is because of the culture, because of the built-in biases, which is what you're dealing with here.
So now here it is about 40 years later, 35 years later, from the time you conceived of this domination model. So how do you see it applying now in this problem that we're talking about here at this conference, where women who report abuse or women who are trying to protect their children are really shot down by the legal system? How do you analyze that, and what do we need to do about that according to your approach and your thinking?
Well, unfortunately, we have inherited a gender system of values, as I said, from more rigid domination times, in which anything, in which women and anything stereotypically associated with women is considered less valuable. But you see it more in more rigid domination systems. I mean, in places where the Sharia, so-called Islamic regimes, where a woman's testimony is considered so much less valuable than a man's, that it takes two women to counter the word of a man. Fortunately, we don't have that, but that same devaluation really is there. And that is, I think, where we have to really recognize that. And of course, all that we can do, which I have done for the last decades in my advocacy work, is really to show the inequity of this, but also to show the insanity of it. And for example, our Caring Economy campaign is devoted to showing the enormous value, not only in human terms, but also in purely economic terms, of the work still primarily done by women, the work of caring for others, starting in early childhood. It's a cultural issue. We have to fight it on all fronts. Certainly, legal cases, appeals, getting good counsel is very, very important. And also changing the culture at the same time.
And how do we do that? Do you have specific advice for the people in this room, what they can do to bring us more forward along this line that you're talking about, where women are seen as equally valued, as equally credible, and are given, that type of consideration, whether or not they're in a legal case or a custody case? How do we change this culture? And I think this is a question that probably everybody has on their mind.
Well, we fought, of course, in the 70s, 80s, and are still fighting that battle on the legal front.
Yeah.
And I think there is certainly still work to be done there. I said, that having good character witnesses, having a good attorney, really being in charge of your own case, because ultimately that's what you have to be. Find the best resources, go to court, not only pointing the finger at the abuser, but showing the veracity and the reliability of your own testimony. So I think that that's very specific, of course, and I'm sure you all know this, And it's not simple, but it has to be done. On the cultural level, of course, we're talking about raising the status of women. We have succeeded in many, many ways. I mean, I remember when I first started, because I did used to practice law, and when there was a so-called domestic altercation, that's what they called it, rather than a domestic violence case, the police would come and they just walked the guy around the block several times until he pulled off, and then sent him back to continue his abuse and violence. Today, we no longer accept this. So let's really think of our successes as well as our lack of movement here, because we have, even in the last 30 years, in one generation, moved forward. I think that in terms of very specifically changing the way that women are regarded, what you're doing is very important. Forming groups, forming organizations, making the issue visible. That's very, very important. As for changing the culture, it's a struggle that's going on at all levels. You know, equal pay for equal work. I happen to be working in an area that I think is enormously important, especially for mothers and other caregivers, which is to get policies that change the unconscionable fact that, according to last year's Shriver report, and I wrote an article for it, 1/3 of American women either live in poverty or are on the brink of poverty. And as I wrote in that article, and you can access it on my website, which is rionheisler.com, one of the major reasons for this is not only job discrimination, it's because most of these women are caregivers in homes. And we're the only nation, and we have developed new metrics at the Caring Economy campaign, caringeconomy.org, showing this. We're the only so-called developed nation that doesn't have paid parental leave, that doesn't have, the most minimal investment in early child care. All those things that really mothers, especially single mothers, divorced mothers, urgently need, including stipends for helping to care children, such as caregiver tax credits. You know, we have tax credits for the children, but the caregiver is invisible. So I really want to invite you to consider that changing the valuation, especially the work that women do in homes, the caregiving women do in homes, is very, very important, because with economic security comes more capacity and more power. So that's an area I've been working on through our Caring Economy campaign, and you can find out about it at caringeconomy.org. And we have webinars, and we give scholarships for these webinars for those who can't afford them. So check it out. We also have free webinars. The other program that I've been working on is the Spiritual Alliance to Stop Intimate Violence. And one thing that I believe very strongly is we have to really engage faith communities, because they have to really stop giving women poor advice. That's one thing. And, like go placate him or, try to figure out, And secondly, they really have to speak out much more strongly against violence, this violence against women and children, this abuse of women and children. So if you want to find out more about that, go to SAIB for Spiritual Alliances IntimateViolence.org. So those are two areas where I think we really can accelerate progress. And I say accelerate because let's not forget, we have made some progress.
Can you speak? I have one question, and then I want to open it up in the last few minutes and see if anybody else has questions. But do you know of any countries in the world that do it right, where women are not subjected to this kind of treatment in the court system, and where there is greater enlightenment and greater equality?
And I think greater is the issue, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I would say that in Nordic nations like Sweden, Finland, Norway, and this is something I really believe is very, very important, you also have, well, first of all, you have laws. They pioneered laws saying that it's against the law to use physical discipline against children, okay, in families. They also have a strong men's movement, and this is a very important part of this, engaging men to redefine what does it mean to be a real man, quote unquote. But they have the lowest gender gaps. They are the nations that orient most closely to the partnership side. They're certainly not perfect. They have violence against women and children, but at least they're working. They even have national conferences on changing men's self-image and changing the definition of masculinity. I think that that's very, very important. And of course, men lose also as well as women, because men really have to shut down part of their humanity. You know, they're more sensitive and caring part. And, well, you know, I've written a great deal about this in my books. There's a book that I can highly recommend, and that's The Power of Partnership. And it's my attempt at a self-help book, and actually it won the award as the best self-help book of the year. But it's very different from most self-help books, because it really looks at how we can change how we relate to ourselves, intimate relations, etc., and how to recognize patterns of domination and how to move to the partnership side. That, I think, is a very useful tool, because it's both on the personal level and the social level that book has. And it's a self-help book also in the sense that it has, first steps and more actions, etc., at the end of each chapter. So I think that would be a very practical tool as well.
Wonderful. Let me see if anybody in our last few minutes has a question.
Any question for me advice?
Could you repeat the title of your book again? The last book you mentioned.
The Power of Partnership. And you can get it, The Power of Partnership, you can get it from at partnershipway.org, from the center. You can get it on Amazon. You can ask your local bookstore to order it. If you still have that endangered species called an independent bookstore, don't get it from your independent bookstore.
Right. Thank you.
Other questions?
We are privileged to have you, Rianne. Thank you so much. We're going to put the links to your organizations on our website. And thank you so much for visiting us and for giving us your wisdom here at the Battered Conference.
Well, I certainly am with you in both spirit and heart.
Thank you so much for your great work.